In Africa, is expected to drop to 20 to 50%. It changed to what is called more El Niño type of conditions. So in one situation that finds the women that are working in agriculture, for example, just in Africa, they produce in some places up to 73% of the food. However, they don't have access to the same services. They don't own the land. In some parts of the world, only 1%, 5%, 10%, depending on the area that you are. But also, 50% of the women and the children in developing countries are already animal. So that means that it finds them already in a vulnerable situation, climate change. And what is more amazing also in a lot of countries is the way that food is being distributed. And this is something also that the men and the women are telling us in different parts of the world. If you have a chicken, and you're going to distribute it within the household, the man usually gets what? A bigger piece in your developing country. For example, our soup and reduce what do the men usually get? The best pieces. Okay. And women usually eat the neck, the wing, and the legs of the chicken. Yeah, the neck. Which has
the men and women like the neck.
Ah yes, that's what they said. In Nepal they will say, oh yes. In Costa Rica they said, women like to suck the legs of the chicken. There's nothing to suck. That's finger, that's a nail. So let me just. But yes. So that is the condition that it finds. So women also usually tell you, we act like the buffer zone. Like in a protected area, we are the buffer zone between food security and the household. So the less there is, the less that they distribute to themselves and the younger girls usually. And chronic and acute child malnutrition. Remember the NDGs. Remember the NDGs that talks about reducing women mortality and also child mortality. Is the cause for 3.5 of the million mothers and young children's every day. So climate change is just going to exacerbate what we're seeing in that respect. Increasing epidemics, I was telling you, for example, the case of malaria, models estimate that 260 to 320 million more people will be affected by malaria by 2080. And this is because it's changing. And we know so far that malaria, pregnant women are very susceptible to viral diseases, often resulting for a quarter of maternal mortalities. So this again is some of the conditions of climate change. But women are also drivers of change, and they have seen their power. For example, in countries with higher female parliamentary representation, according to the Human Development Report of 2011, are more likely to set aside protected land areas, and a study of 25 developed and 60 developing countries reveal that. And of the 49 countries that reduced carbon dioxide emissions between 1990 and 2007, 14 were very high human development index countries. So there might be, and there's a need for further studies, but it does seem that in those countries in which women are more in decision-making powers in relation to environment, environment also faces a better chance of survival. Women in agriculture, it's another way that we relate very closely to climate change, and you're going to see it when you go and see some of the ways that the countries are talking about it. According to the FAO, if women had the same access to productive resources and services as men did, they could increase the yields by 20 to 30%. This would raise the total agriculture output in the developing countries up to 4%. And as Francois pointed out, it means that from every 10 persons that are in hunger, we would take one out just by that fact. So again, empowerment and access to those assets is fundamental. But it's not only about the quantity, but also about the quality. We know that when basic men went to monoculture, women remained and kept a lot of the varieties of seeds. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But also they kept a variety of plants that are very rich in nutrients that are needed. Next one, please. For the development of the brain of the younger person. From 0 to 5 is when your brain develops in the child. And it needs certain micronutrients. And if you don't have them, later on you can give the kid whatever you want. It's over. If you don't provide those micronutrients from 0 to 5 years of age, it's gone. You can't change that. And most of those micronutrients and antioxidants are among the things that are usually within the elements of the wild plants that women are managing. Next. So look at this, for example. This is an excellent example of some of the plants that women in Africa are using. This is cabbage. On iron, 0.7, calcium, 47, beta-carotene, 100. That's the nutritional value of cabbage. Compare it to the other products that women are keeping and feeding the children. And that is fundamental. I mean, look at beta-carotene. For me, that's cleome. It's of the families of the tomatoes, as far as I understand. 10,452. I mean, that is quite a difference between cabbage. So it's not only about the quantity, but also about the quality. And I was saying, in these combined strategies, these women that kept thousands of varieties of seeds. We have it, for example, in Rwanda, we have it in Peru, we have it in Cuba. What is very interesting, we have it in Nepal, we have it in Bangladesh. What is very interesting right now is that the scientists working on climate change are coming back to these banks of genes that women have been keeping and asking them for those seeds. Because those seeds, what usually women have kept them, is because they adapt to different kind of conditions. And women knows that. Women will tell you, you know, this year is going to be drier. We're going to plant this type of seed. Or better soil. For example, in Cuba now, the bank seeds are in the hands of the women. They have 600 varieties of rice in Cuba, but it's not the origin of rice, that they are distributing and planting according to the changes of the conditions of the conditions. Water, we have seen them participating on water and education programs, management and efficient use of irrigation and water resources at different levels. And the World Bank did a very, very good study about 120 projects dealing with water. And they found out that in those projects in which the gender perspective was part of it, were the projects that were running the best. Energy, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but what's important is that climate change feels a lot about changing the way that we consume and that we produce energy. But it's important to recognize that the roles and the services that both women and men need sometimes are very different, and that they have a very important role to play. Consumption, my favorite. Yesterday, my colleague back there, you asked the question on population, right? Yes. And we said that there were two topics that were fundamental for climate change: population issues and consumption. And as I understand, we can address better consumption than population issues. But women, according to OECD, make 80% of the decisions of what has to be bought within the household. So this is another area, especially in urban areas, where women are telling us, if I knew that my decisions were having this impact on the environment, if I knew what is carbon footprint, then I can change my patterns of consumption. And a lot of the feminists in the North are realizing that their consumption patterns are really making poorer women in the South. And that if you call yourself a feminist, you should also keep a track of your consumption, because that is affecting your carbon footprint, and that at the end is having an impact on thousands of women around the world. And despite these facts, this is what we're seeing. I showed you that picture yesterday, and like that we have 1,000. this is what we see of climate change. I mean, there are women in different parts of the world trying to combat climate change, trying to adapt to climate change, fighting for changing their consumption patterns, but we're nowhere to be seen in those processes. And sometimes the women that represent us are not gender sensitive because it doesn't come with your genes that you're going to be gender sensitive because you're a woman. We have that many of those in the world. And sometimes it's very sad, even though some of that data is changing thanks to the project that we're doing. But in 2006, the percentage of females head delegation was 15.7, and in 2007 it was 12%. We're looking for the data. UNFCCC has to give us the data of the last one. Verdusi, Ira, do you remember the last data for the last COP? Because we have not got it. 19%. No, 19% in the delegations, but not as heads.
But if we look at the delegations and we have been looking at the figures,
it has been growing.
We have cooperated, so let's say the last 5 years, the number of female delegates has increased.
And that is very important because I'm just going to follow up what Ira was saying before giving it to you. One of the strategies that we have been having in this climate change alliance that we're in is to support women, to pay them so that they can come as part of the delegations. And Verdusi is an example of a women in the delegation of Bangladesh.
Only one. Only one woman from Bangladesh.
Exactly, and if it wasn't for that fund, you wouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
So
I cannot come, could not come last 2 meetings because of funding.
Exactly.
No women from Bangladesh.
And Sian is also a women delegate from Liberia, for example. But what has happened is that there was a little bit of push and pull at the beginning to get the women in the delegations, and the men said, oh, why don't we give a woman? Or if we have money, we're not going to give it to the women. But little by little, some of the women have proven to be excellent negotiators, and we have, for example, Patience that is now leading the African, is it the adaptation group of UNFCCC, and she started as a women delegate. So, I mean, they have been with.
But I just want to add that these women who have been able to fund have not made a change. 10 women is not very much in a group of 20,000 or something like that. But the reason why the number has been increasing is the awareness raising and training activities I used to do. Now people start to understand what interest may be also in the country.
Yeah, Francois is going to tell you, thank you, Ira, because it has been a process in different levels. Francois is going to talk more about that. But one of the things that we did, and that's very much the linkages that we do with the Commission on Communication and Education, is that once we build that knowledge, that training manual, we start developing the capacity and updating, because we never train those. You update them on the latest information on gender and climate change. And they got it. They got the linkages. And for the first time, we heard in 2007 delegation saying, no, Poznan, 2008. For the first time, Liberia, which just received an award for that, stood up in a meeting after coming from an updating session and said, what about gender? For the first time ever that happened. So some final thoughts that I said yesterday. We can prevent what is happening with climate change. Even if today we go CO2 neutral, the effects of what we have done, we're going to continue facing them, and stronger and more complicated than what we can expect. That we cannot stop. But we can start making changes when it comes to the human capacity, the collectiveness for facing climate change. This knowledge of what to do, what is going to happen, how can I plan, how can I look to the future, that is in our hands. And women's rights, the right to understand, the right to go to school, the right to own the land, the right to decide how we're going to face climate change. It's something that each one of us can do. And these are the bodies of the women that usually count after disasters. 90% of them are women that would have been saved if they just understood what 260 kilometers of winds were. If they had just understood what climate change is and how much is it going to affect them. In Liberia, for example, women are telling us, let us be the guardians of the coasts. We want to know and understand what sand erosion is. We want to control who can come and mine from our shores. We want to understand when the stores are coming. We want to have that information. We deserve to have access to that. Want to know what to do, but also to act as the guardians of our natural resources. Comments? Questions? Comments? No. Okay.
Just a quick question. Your PowerPoint is incredible. I'm wondering if you're going to update it on the website, or if we can go back to the blurry slide for a minute. I just wanted to get a particular stat. So.
Okay. Supposedly all the presentations are uploaded on the IUCN web space.
I just looked at it and see it.
Have you said to us, because we are saying
It is very big produced because of the pictures, but Ina, as far as I understood, I have to give you a copy of the presentation so that you can put them on the web space, right? Yes. So they're going to be, if you log on the session number.
Yeah, I actually just did that. They're not there yet.
No, they're not there yet because we're just doing them right now. And then we have to put them on the PDF version. So, but in case you don't get it by any chance, I'll give you my card.
Okay.
Thank you. Also, if you look at the manual on gender and climate change, you can see some of the statistics that are here. And we have a website called genderandenvironment.org, and there you have the latest of the information that we're using. Also, you might be interested that in the national strategies that we are producing, we are collecting a lot of information country-wise and county in those countries. So the information that we're having is even more disaggregated by country and by region or by county that you might want to do. For example, the data for malaria in Liberia is amazing, for example, if you're interested in that type of producing.
Thank you very much for today. It started to as a bullet train.
Yes, of course.
Now it is a local train, so we can understand many things. I have just one question to you that, in Bangladesh, when they talk about the gender, you have seen, you may remember somebody, the Bangkok meeting last year, the UNDP asked for selects 4 people from Bangladesh for attending the meeting in Bangkok about the gender and climate change. One name is Lucy Sen, about me, and other 3 is from government, and then they sent 3 women, no men there. So gender always means the women in Bangladesh. So then people are laughed about it. And for strategy action plan, I have to get a letter from focal point. I have to struggle 1 year. This 1 year, I went to our secretary, minister, and everybody about 50 times. And I am a teacher of the policy maker, but I failed to convince them because lastly it happens. So how can we change this attitude,
that.
Some of the women are also against of the gender.
I think, producer, some of your questions are going to be answered in the afternoon, where we have the colleagues from the Commission on Education and Communication that are going to give us tips precisely of how to communicate better. I agree with you. When we started this process, I was one of the ones that said we need a training course only for men that could understand the linkages between gender and climate change. And product of that training is Francois. That from all those people that we trained, we selected a group of men that could come with us along to work on climate change. And it's not easy because we come from different perceptions and different perspectives, and we still have to struggle and get ourselves okay to work as a team on gender issues. Sometimes it's not easy. But it does make a difference when we go and work, for example, we have been working on the Arab countries, Jordan, Egypt, to have a mixed group to deliver the message. Of course, sometimes I'm not even the train, what do you call it, the city train? I am in the back of the wagon.